Hello and welcome to Homeschool Together. I am eternally sorry that my partner in crime is not here today, but we caught the pestilence. Yes, the pestilence. And she is currently out of the room, in the living room, coughing her brains out. So I apologize, but we're going to fly solo today. And I'm sorry you got to stare at my silly face. And I apologize. My wife's always better at this stuff. I'm always terrible. She's the best. But we were in our last stop on our around the world journey, Antarctica, and it's kind of a double-edged study, both the top and the bottom of the world. So we did both the Arctic and the Antarctic, but for us, we focused on the Antarctic. And the way we went around the world, kind of ending in Oceania, it was a really nice, just natural flow, just to head down to the bottom of the planet. We covered a lot of the tundra and Arctic stuff in kind of the Norwegian countries, in Siberia when we studied Russia, and also in Canada and a little bit of in Alaska. But we will touch on a little bit of that today and on a few of the books that we read as well. And if you're thinking about adding some additional Arctic books, you can do that on those when you're studying those countries as well. But we'll talk about a little bit of them here. So let's kind of get into it. So the first thing is I'm going to cover the Arctic. So we're going to head north and then we'll finish in the south, where bulk of the books that we actually read were focused down below. So first is the Arctic Fox's Journey. This was just a wonderful story. It's one of the most amazing journeys to actually learn about what these Arctic foxes do and how far they travel. You know, they're traveling massive amounts of, enormous numbers of miles from basically one country to the other through the frozen Arctic. It's an unbelievable story, and this story touched on it. So basically it's about the story of a young fox who went on its first journey across the Arctic, looking for food, trying to survive. The artwork was beautiful, and it's just an amazing story. And it's kind of hard for a young person to kind of wrap their head around the fact that these foxes can cross thousands and thousands of miles of frozen wilderness and living in the winter, in the very, very, very dark north during the winter time, and surviving and doing that. And they talk about this in this book. I love this book. It's one of the coolest stories you could ever read about is the journey of the Arctic foxes. There's a lot of great videos on YouTube that kind of dovetail with this, where they've put trackers on these foxes. It's a great thing that if you can find to show as a kind of an accompaniment to the book, to really kind of drive home how far these foxes can roam in the Arctic. It was a great story. I loved it, and my learner really loved it. It was a nice little, because we were going to focus on penguins and everything, but it was really cool to kind of get another animal that lives kind of in the north that just does these amazing journeys, and I really, really like this one. Next one is this actually a new series of books for us. It's called One Small Square, and this is specifically the Arctic tundra version of the book. And what this book is, it's basically an informational where they allow you to look at a 6 by 6 by, in essence, 6 square of land. From the top of the ground, a little bit above it, all the way to below where, like the critters and the bugs live. And they take you through the year, and all the big animals and the small animals and all the little critters, the land animals, the land mammals, that call that piece of land home. And I really like this idea of telling a story through just like a patch of land. And it was really, really cool. So the artwork is beautiful, very much informational. You can kind of nibble at this through the week. Especially if you're trying to do your Arctic study or your Antarctic study and trying to really drive home the seasons and the fact that the winters are so very dark and the summers are so very bright. Really, really cool way to kind of drive that home, because they do talk about how the long seasons that are here and how those animals cope with that on this little patch of dirt. I really like this idea. Definitely take a look at the other books in this series, basically the One Small Square series. I really like the idea of connecting the land and kind of this volumetric, but also through time. And I think that's a really cool way to kind of give an informational around animals and the flora and fauna of the region. So another good one that we had. We didn't read this one this week, but if you are doing an Arctic study, Jan Brett, a wonderful artist, wonderful writer, wonderful story. This is a kind of an honorable mention. If you were looking for another book that kind of has a polar bears, I believe this is the Three Little Bears, Goldilocks-y type of story, adapted to polar bears. I could be wrong, but I believe that's the nature of the story. I didn't get a chance to read this one, this book this week, but we've recommended her books before, and they're always fantastic. I mean, just the artwork alone, just gorgeous. So vibrant and so rich. I love these stories. I love this author. If you have a chance, go ahead, toss this on. If you can't get any of the other books in your library, definitely worth a second or two to take a look. Next is a couple chapter books. One is an honorable mention and one we read. So Greetings from Somewhere is a book series we've been obviously recommending all through our books, all through our videos. We can't recommend this high enough. This one is set up in Alaska, so if you're doing the U.S. study, if you're leading off on that, you can pull this in if you're doing a little bit of an Alaska, kind of like couple days in Alaska. Good book to do that. But if you're doing an Arctic tour, this is a good chapter book for you to do. Basically, our two homeschooling children and their parents who are, jet setting around the world, writing travel articles about various regions they're going to, wind up in Alaska, in Nome, all the way up in the Arctic Circle. Their car breaks down, they got to stay in an inn, and there's a mystery. And the mystery is all the fish are disappearing that are being caught, and somebody's stealing the fish, and lo and behold, it's a polar bear. And it's a little polar bear. It's a baby polar bear, and it's teamed up with a dog. And it's kind of just a fun, light story. These are great reads. You can get through them like in maybe 40 minutes. They're just an absolute easy breeze. So again, Greetings from Somewhere, The Mystery of the Ice Paw Prince. Great little read, great little chapter book if you're doing an Arctic study. We didn't read this one this week, but we just wanted to mention it as well. The Magic Tree House has The Polar Bear's Past Bedtime. We've recommended a few Magic Tree House books through our videos. But again, if you're looking for a chapter book that is focused on kind of that Arctic region, and you're looking for something of that nature, maybe a Canada study, got the Polar Bear book here as well. So definitely something to look into if you can't get yourself into the other books. So that's the Arctic, kind of short. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about the Antarctic. And this is where we kind of did our focus. And so we always like to talk about the focus. I wanted to get the Arctic out of the way. We did read a lot of these books, but our main focus was in Antarctica. So we focused on Shackleton and penguins. And that's probably, for me, I love the Shackleton story. It's one of my favorite stories of all time. Well, the whole story of the endurance, getting locked into the ice. It's just, and then surviving. It's just an incredible story. And then obviously, if you talk about Antarctica, what are you going to talk about? Penguins. Obviously, penguins. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But the first book is the recommended book from both Torchlight and Build Your Library, and it is Sophie Scott Goes South. Now, this has kind of both it's a fiction story, but it's written in a diary format with actual pictures that I believe the author actually went on a trip to Antarctica and used her pictures as kind of material for the book. Absolutely fantastic book, wonderful drawings, but it's told in a diary form of a young girl going with her father, who is basically a captain of an ice-breaking ship, and how they prepared to go to Antarctica. Got all their gear, and then when she's on the boat, life on the boat, the food, how do they get dressed into their winter clothes? They run into some trouble because they're delivering materials to one of the research camps down in Antarctica. They get stuck in the ice. They gotta wait for a little while, then they get free, and then they deliver it. And then she spends a little bit of time at the station and learning about what goes on down there. And eventually she finds her way home. And it's an absolutely fun story. This was the recommended book, and we recommend it as well. It was a great story, very lively, a little bit longer than a normal children's book. So you may want to take a couple sittings and maybe read a couple, maybe 3 or 4 pages a day, and then kind of couple that with some additional books around Antarctica, especially when they get into some of the animals. You may pull in some of the books that we're going to recommend here in a minute or so, but really fun story, really great story. And if you got girls who are explorers and they're really go-getters, great story for them to listen to and emulate. I loved it. My daughter's eyes were like wide when she read it. I really like this one. So Sophie Scott Goes South. Next are our 3 Shackleton books. And I really would recommend getting probably 2 of the 3. And those probably for me are the Trapped in the Ice, and then You Wouldn't Want to Be a Polar Explorer. And so we'll start here first. We have recommended these You Wouldn't Want to Be books a number of times throughout our videos. And these are just basically wonderful books onto the nuance of the average person who lived through history, famous famous events, whether it's, I think, Alexander's army, or you wouldn't want to be somebody who built the Great Wall. One of the things about history that's lost is what the experience of the average person is in history, especially in these time periods that are super long ago, where there's not much written history except the kings and queens and the movers and shakers. These books kind of get into the nitty gritty of what was an average person's experience. In this book, you wouldn't want to be a polar explorer focused on the Shackleton story. And I really like this. I love the animation, the art, the artwork. It tells the story of Shackleton's journey, but through the experience of the average Joe who was on the boat, pulling the boat through the ice, pulling the sleds across the ice, rowing to the island, trying to survive on the island, in the tents, journeying across the ocean. Not too many people went with Shackleton to South George, but getting to there and then actually surviving and enduring. That is the essence of this story, and it's a wonderful dovetail with one of the next two books, which do focus on the Shackleton journey. So Trapped by the Ice, I like this one. I like the other one too as well that I'll recommend in a second, but basically telling the chronological experience of the Shackleton journey. So getting trapped in the ice, it's a famous story. They go south. Amundsen already reached the South Pole. Scott's lost. And Shackleton has devised the idea that he wants to cross Antarctica, do a transcontinental journey across the entire continent as being the first person to do that. And lo and behold, they immediately get there and they get stuck. And they get stuck and stuck and stuck, and they can't get out. And eventually the boat, which is called the Endurance, which did not endure very well, gets lost, it sinks. They have to go by sled to an island. And then they have to survive on the island. And Shackleton takes probably one of the most daring boat journeys, probably one of the most amazing boat journeys of all time. 800-mile row to sail basically to South George Island with like just 3 guys. And then they get to South George Island. They have to then cross 4,000-foot mountains to get down into the whaling port. And then they have to wait months to come and rescue everybody, and everybody survives. Everybody survives. It's such a great story, and I will recommend a video as well. I recommend this one. Also, there's a wonderful supplementary to that, is Shackleton's Journey. And this is told the exact same story, a little bit more in depth, and a little bit more of a different art style. I don't necessarily like this art style as much. It's a little bit minimalistic for me. I like a little bit more of the color. So the you wouldn't want to be a polar explorer. I think it has a little bit more vibrant artwork. I think that can capture the interest. But if you are interested in a little bit more, absolutely would recommend this one as well. We got all 3. We read all 3. We enjoyed it. We enjoyed it a ton. I'm going to pull in the movie recommendation because I think it kind of goes well with that. And that was made a couple years ago. I think A&E made the movie, and it was with Kenneth Branagh, and it was the story of Shackleton. This is a longer movie. I don't think it's very... We were watching with our 6-year-old, and our 3-year-old's kind of running around crazy. I don't know if this is really for 6 or 7-year-old. I don't know if I would do that. Maybe if you have an older learner that's tagging along. It's a longer movie. There's dogs getting dead things, and there's a little bit of marital issues as well that may be a little bit more nuanced. Great story, great movie, but maybe something for a little bit if you have an older student who you want to watch a movie at night when the little ones are asleep. Definitely would recommend Shackleton with Kenneth Branagh. Really, really good. Holds up. I think it's about 20 years old. It's a great story. Branagh does a wonderful job playing Shackleton. So we're going to continue on with our Except Antarctica. So it's one of those classic books that likes to kind of break the fourth wall, where you're reading the book and you're the narrator is saying, well, there's so many animals that live in Antarctica except turtles. There are no turtles in Antarctica. And the turtle looks at the reader and says, oh yeah, just watch me. He decides to go and take his journey and get his really cool hat on and start to head south towards Antarctica. And along the way, he finds that there are some additional animals that are not in Antarctica, like snakes or bees or mice, or I think there was a dung beetle that wanted to hitch a ride, and they all start heading south to Antarctica. And eventually they get there and they realize it's not an easy journey to get to Antarctica. And eventually they all realize that it is gosh darn cold in Antarctica. They end up wanting to head home because they realize they've been there, they've done it, they want to go back. Really fun story. My learner loved this one. It was just kind of a playful story. It's one of those great kind of educational but also very playful stories. I really liked it. She liked it. I'd recommend getting this one as well. Next, we're going to get into a pair of kind of getting kind of more non-fiction-y style books. First here is the rookie read about geography books. So this is a series of books we haven't recommended before, but this one's on Antarctica, and it's just a very, very simple book, informational, very, very large font, simple pictures. Nothing, super amazing other than just kind of giving you some information and then some pictures of the animals that are in that region. Just basically walking through Antarctica, talked about the ice, talked about the volcanoes, talked about the animals, talked about the experience of being there. Just a really simple, short, quick read if you're looking for kind of a nonfiction, a book about Antarctica. We got one right here as well, so definitely take a look at it. Also, we've talked a lot about the Who Is, Where Is book series, whether it's a famous composer or scientist or whatnot. There is a version of that for the Where Is Antarctica, and these are longer form books. They're maybe like 70-80 pages. Definitely not something you'd probably want to sit down and read all the way through. More of something that you want to pick a small section or small chapter and read about, especially if that section or chapter is dovetailing with something that you're already learning about, whether it's penguins, whether it's journeying south. They talk about the polar explorers. They talk about, the seasons, the extreme seasons in that area. They talk a lot about the geography, the region, the history of the area. Really interesting, but definitely something you don't want to sit and read all the way through. Not something like the, Greetings from Somewhere or the Magic Treehouse books. This is something you just want to kind of nibble and piece through based on what your learner is interested in. But we always like these. These are always really great, in-depth nonfiction information about the region. So we would recommend this one as well. Next, the last one is just kind of a very playful, informational with respect to the animals that live in Antarctica. And if you think about it, it's such an unbelievably inhospitable area of the world, and it's just shocking that animals can live down there and then thrive down there. And this is One Day on Our Blue Planet. And so basically, if you remember from Happy Feet, I believe this was kind of the Robin Williams type of character, Macaroni Penguin, if I remember right. And basically you're just following this penguin as he kind of wanders around the area, and you get to learn about all the various birds and animals that call Antarctica home at various points of the year. Because a lot of these animals can tend to be migratory. Penguins obviously call that place home. And so just a really, really beautiful, I liked the artwork. Kind of this very vibrant, almost feels like kind of collage style artwork. I do enjoy these type of styles, but just a very simple book that you just read a lot of information and see if your learner can enjoy or kind of key in on a certain animal that they might enjoy, and it might help drive your study for the week. Whatever you want to learn about. So really nice one. I like this one a lot. So we talked about the books. We'll talk a little bit about the movies. We talked Shackleton, so obviously we recommend I recommend the Shackleton for maybe just the Shackleton story movie for a little bit older learners, maybe not the kindergarten, maybe first grade level, maybe second or third grade level. There's a little bit more of heavier content in the story, so it might be a little bit more confusing, maybe a little bit more explanation is needed. So we talked a little bit about that one. Obviously won the Academy Award for Best Documentary about 15-20 years ago. March of the Penguins. Morgan Freeman narrates the story. What is surprising that we realized when we watched this is how far nature documentaries have come since March of the Penguins. And the March of the Penguins, for us at home who've watched like the Planet Earths or the various myriad of nature documentaries that are all over Disney Plus or Netflix, they have come a long way. The digital cameras, the drone footage that they use now, the in situ cameras that they can put in place are far superior. It's amazing how far our nature documentaries have come, but this was one of the big ones that came out, I think, about 15-20 years ago. Fantastic, very emotional, lost eggs, lost babies, surviving, struggle, penguins living the very, very, very tough life to eke out an existence on the bottom of the world. So really powerful story, really exciting. Both our daughters really, really enjoyed this one. We also watched Eight Below. I did not watch Eight Below, but it is on Disney Plus, and it stars Paul Walker, the late Paul Walker, as kind of an explorer with dogs. I caught a couple scenes of it, but both of our daughters were absolutely over the moon on this story, and even Ariel was just like, this is a really good story. So they all recommend it. Ariel recommending it from the living room over there. Probably coughing right now. You can probably hear it in the distance. She's doing okay. She's just got the nagging cough. But Eight Below, I think, is on Disney Plus. Absolutely recommend that. My wife wanted to mention that right before she left. Was that Eight Below is a really, really good movie, and she would recommend you guys seeing it. Now, with respect to videos, there's just so many. There's a great Werner Herzog documentary that's set in Antarctica, and that I know my wife who edits these videos and posts them, her eyes just rolled big time. There's a really good one out there, but definitely for a little bit of the older learners, definitely not for the younger learners. If you are into Werner Herzog, he had a great documentary down there. Also, there's obviously the great nature documentaries that do cover that region. We watched a few. I believe there was one on Netflix where they talked about the poles, and they went into the experience of the penguins. And I think they talked about the seals, and I think there's a few on the whales as well. I remember talking about the whales and the plankton, and then the killer whales, which are the orcas up here in the Pacific Northwest. There's also obviously killer whales down there as well. So it's nice to kind of draw that together. That's a big thing for us here in the Pacific Northwest. That was basically our study. Shackleton, penguins. We covered a little bit of Arctic, but also there was another chapter book that I left out. My wife is laughing. So this is what happens when you fly solo. Mr. Popper's Penguins. Ariel read this to my daughter, and she really, really liked it. Basically, it's a story about a painter who, by happenstance, came into possess a penguin, and he became friends with this penguin. But eventually the penguin kind of got a little down, a little sad, and he worked with the local zoo to find a female penguin that maybe they needed to pair together. And then through the magic of migratory stork delivery, Mr. Popper all of a sudden had lots of penguins, lots and lots of penguins, and they converted their house to have snow and everything, so all the penguins could have a good old time. Eventually they started doing tricks, and they traveled, and they did all these performances. Finally they said, well, it's getting warm out and these penguins need to go somewhere. And they said, well, why don't we start to create a colony of penguins in the north, in the Arctic? So if you're looking for a book that kind of blends the Arctic to the Antarctic, the polar explorer that gave him his original penguin let Mr. Popper go north to help settle a number of penguins in the north. Obviously a fictional story, but Ariel loved this story. My daughter loved this story. It's very whimsical, very, very lighthearted, very wholesome story. If you're looking for a nice little reader, you're thinking about maybe the length of a little bit longer than a Greetings from Somewhere. So you're looking at maybe an hour and 15 minutes to read the entire story, but really nice little playful drawings. I believe this was a Newbery winner a long time ago. So really, really cute story. Wonderful. That was the final video. So we have been all the way around the world, and I'm very sorry my wife cannot be here. She definitely wanted to do it. We tried, and she could not stop coughing. So she took a leave, and I'm so happy to have been able to do this video for you guys today, but also so happy to have made all these videos for our Around the World journey. But I know if you're sitting there and you're going, oh no, there's no more videos. Absolutely not. We're going to put out a number of videos coming out in the next couple weeks, maybe next couple months, all about the spines that we use. We covered them along the way, but we wanted to have some more elaborate reviews of spine books that we have been covering over these last, oh my gosh, year or so, year plus. And we want to talk about some additional books that we wanted to do and additional resources. So our videos are not done. And then we're also continuing into our Build Your Library, Blossom and Root, early history, early kind of dinosaurs, prehistory, and we're going to start doing videos about that as well. So definitely stay tuned. We're definitely not going to stop making videos, but we appreciate you guys following us along the way. We really hope these videos helped you guys. This was a great journey for us. It was a great time putting all this together, and we hope this helps you as well. Head down in the show notes, subscribe to the podcast, check out our resource guides that we are filtering out. I'm working on Asia right now, and we're gonna have those out to you guys over the next couple months. Ariel has been putting the screws to me to get my Patukas working, and I'm doing that. So thank you guys. We appreciate all of you. If you haven't yet, subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and we hope to see more and hear more from you guys.